At just 39, I faced a decision that changed my life forever: open heart surgery. Today I'm celebrating my 8-year anniversary of a surgery rarely performed on adults, known as the Ross procedure. It's the same surgery that Arnold Schwarzenegger had on his heart. I was a candidate because my bicuspid aortic valve was slowly deteriorating, but it was not really bad, and I was in good health otherwise, and under the age of 40. I turned 39 that year. In the spring, my cardiologist asked my permission to send a referral to Dr. David, the only surgeon in Canada who performed the surgery in the Toronto General Hospital, and I agreed. September 21st, I got a phone call letting me know that Dr. David agreed that I was a good candidate for surgery, and my operation was now scheduled for October 17th, 2016, less than a month away. I was a jumble of emotions at first. And my first thought was, this isn't what I had planned. I knew heart surgery was in my future, but maybe in my late 50s or 60s. Now I had to try to mentally prepare for major surgery that was going to happen in only 3 weeks. I've been asked so many times, why would you choose to have open heart surgery before you really needed it? The Ross procedure is complicated surgery. It's also called the Pulmonary Autograph procedure. It's used to replace a bicuspid aortic valve. It's not available to everyone with heart disease. It's usually for young, active people without other bigger health problems. It suits anyone with at least a 25-year life expectancy. During the Ross procedure, the surgeon makes a 6-inch long incision down the middle of your chest, cuts through your breastbone, and spreads your rib cage apart so that they can reach your heart directly and treat the heart issue you have. A heart-lung bypass machine connects to your heart and temporarily takes over for your heart and lungs. The machine circulates blood through your body while moving blood away from your heart. The surgeon then operates on a heart that isn't beating and doesn't have blood flow. Then they take out your bad aortic valve and replace it with your own pulmonary valve because it's similar to the aortic valve. Then the surgeon puts a donated human heart valve in place where the pulmonary valve was. The Ross procedure works really well because the pulmonary valve is shaped like the aortic valve and can handle a lot of blood. The donated heart valve in the pulmonary position is less likely to break because it doesn't need as much pressure to move the blood to the lungs. And within a few months, the pulmonary valve becomes thicker and stronger and begins to behave like aortic valve. Even though it's a tricky procedure, the Ross valve replacement has many things in its favor. People who have this surgery don't need to take blood thinners. The donated heart valve is a living tissue that can talk to other cells in the body. Studies show people live longer without heart problems or needing more surgery compared to mechanical valves, and there are also fewer strokes and less bleeding after surgery. Patients say that they feel better years after having the Ross procedure. So with this information, I was hopeful that I would only need one heart surgery in my lifetime. And also by doing it in my 40s, I would hopefully heal quicker and better. So I believe that this was a good choice for me and decided to undergo open heart surgery before I was in critical need. In those 3 weeks before I flew to Toronto for my surgery, I tried to do all the things I needed to do to be prepared. I tried to prepare my kids for the surgery and how it would affect the next few months of our family life. But looking back, I had no idea what I was walking into. Ignorance is bliss. Saying goodbye to my 2 kids, who were aged 14 and 12 at the time, was the hardest thing I've had to do. They didn't know it at the time, but I had recorded a video message of me singing their favorite children's song for each of them, so they would have something if I didn't make it through surgery and didn't come back.
You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
My husband took an extended leave off work, and we arrived in Toronto 1 day before being admitted and 2 days before my heart surgery. It was my first time in Toronto, so I wanted to see some of the city together. That evening, we rode up to the CN Tower, we wandered around downtown Toronto, and looked for a place to eat. And we can look back and laugh at it now, but at the time I was dead serious when I told my husband, if tonight is my last supper, I want a good steak. So we splurged and ate at the Keg that night. Now each year on October 17th, we go out for dinner to celebrate this anniversary. And when the server asks, "Are you two celebrating anything?" I love to reply, "My open heart surgery." Not everyone can say that. The next morning, I went through the admittance procedure and waited for a bed. I met Dr. David for the very first time, and he explained that the plan was to perform the Ross procedure, but it would depend on the condition of my valve, and he wouldn't know until they had opened me up. If he decided my valve wasn't going to work, I needed plan B. I had to decide whether I would want a mechanical valve or a pig valve instead. And he explained the blood thinners that would be needed for mechanical valve and the 10 to 15 year expectancy of a pig valve and the need for heart surgery again. I made my choice. I felt at peace about what would happen. I was admitted, and that night I slept in the hospital. Back home, I had so many friends and family praying and fasting for me. I could literally feel the power of those prayers, and I felt at peace. I'm a worrier, a worst case scenario girl, so normally I would not have been able to sleep. But that night in the hospital, I slept soundly and peacefully. In the King James Bible, in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7, it reads, "Let your requests be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and your minds through Jesus Christ." It's the only way that I can describe it. I felt a peace that passeth all understanding. Never in my life have I felt a peace like I did that 48 hours leading up to my surgery, and I am so grateful for that. My husband joined me the next morning just before 6:30 a.m. before they moved me to pre-op. He had not had a good night's sleep, and I could tell. And he commented on how calm and relaxed I was because that wasn't normal. Then I tried to describe the peace that I was feeling. In the pre-op room, I was prepared for surgery. Members of the team, one after another, introduced themselves and let me know their role in my surgery. It was time to go, and I was wheeled on the gurney in one direction, and my husband was told that the waiting room was on the 3rd floor and to expect the surgery to take about 3 hours. As I entered the operating room, they asked me if I could move across from the gurney to the operating table, and it felt odd knowing that I was healthy enough to get onto that operating table. A mask was put on my face, and I began to count down from 10, and that was the last thing I remember. Trevor, my husband's experience, is a whole other story, but to summarize what happened, he walked around for 4 hours and then went to the family waiting room, but it was really lonely waiting there all by himself. My surgery took longer than was expected, and the 4 hours turned into 5 and then more, and it was then that Dr. David came in and visited with him. He told Trevor it was a success, and the procedure went as planned. It just took a little longer as there was some scarring from the pericarditis infection that they had needed to work around and clean up. If you want to learn more about pericarditis, I'll include the link to the video at the end of this video. In the ICU, I was unconscious, and I was still hooked up to a couple of IVs, had a breathing tube in my mouth, and had a heart monitor encouraging my heart to beat at a steady rhythm. And I was covered up to my chin in the reddish disinfectant that they had used. I had 2 chest tubes draining fluid, and there was a large bandage on the side of my neck with a tube sticking out, where they bypassed the heart for blood flow during the operation. In short, Trevor later told me that I looked really rough. About 3 hours after surgery, Trevor remembers that I started to wake up. The first thing that I remember is being extremely hot, and I couldn't figure out where I was or why I couldn't talk. The nurse explained that I had a breathing tube in and asked me to try to tell her another way why I was trying to move around so much. I tried to write in the air the word hot, and finally the nurse got a clipboard and I wrote with my left hand again the word hot. My eyes were not yet open, and the right hand had IV sticking out of it. The tube down my throat made it impossible to talk, and so those blankets were removed and a cool washcloth was placed on my head and feet, trying to cool me down. I spent that first night in the ICU and made baby steps of progress along the way. The breathing tube was removed, then the heart was able to be disconnected from the monitor, and my blood pressure stabilized, and I was able to talk, although with a raspy voice. That first night, I would hear a beeping sound, and it would get louder, and then I'd hear a nurse say, "Carrie, when you hear that noise, you have to take a breath." Apparently, I wasn't very good at breathing on my own to begin with. At the end of the second day in the ICU, I was moved up to the cardiac unit, where I was the youngest patient on that unit. Here I made progression, slow and steady, and by the end of day 3, I was expected to get out of bed, to use the washroom, and then to begin increasing walking times with the help of a cardiac walker around the unit. Getting out of bed was the last thing I wanted to do, and I just wanted to sleep and let my body rest. 8 days after being admitted to the hospital, I was discharged. My walking had been primarily around the ward, with the occasional field trip to the hospital atrium. The hotel Trevor had been staying in was only 3 blocks away, and I didn't think it would be a problem. I had walked to the hospital, so why not walk back to the hotel? That was a mistake. It was an extremely long journey. Trevor trying to help me by being very cautious about every step, curb, and ensuring that nobody bumped into me. This was downtown Toronto. There was a pharmacy and on the second block. So we stopped to fill my prescription, and I was so physically exhausted, I fell asleep on a chair waiting for my prescriptions to be filled. It was a quick lesson that I was not healed. I slept in an upright position with at least 4 hotel pillows propped up behind me. We stayed in that hotel for another full week as we waited for a follow-up appointment with Dr. David, my surgeon, to get clearance to fly home to Alberta. When we met with him, he said I was on track and the healing had progressed as had planned. He gave us flight clearance to return home, as well as some words of caution. He said, do not push yourself. Allow your body to heal. Don't run for a year. No soccer, no hockey. Don't get bumped. Do stairs 1 at a time. Don't lift anything over 7 pounds. Don't push or pull open a hydraulic door. The list was much larger, but all designed to help me heal. A picture together was taken and a handshake, and it didn't seem like a big enough thank you for the difference that he had just made in my life. While each patient recovers at their own pace, there is typically about an 8-week period of limited activity with a return to normal activities gradually over 3 to 4 months. Always follow your physician's recommendations, as each person is unique. 6 weeks after surgery, we visited my cardiologist in Calgary, who had monitored me for the last 9 years. He looked at the test results, listened to my heart, and praised the work of Dr. David in Toronto. He then gave the news that had warmed me from head to toe. He said, your heart has been fixed. You don't need to see me anymore. I'm going to transfer you to the Red Deer cardiology team so that you can continue with your yearly monitoring to test your valve function. There is still a long road of recovery in front of me, and one big step now is to begin cardiac rehab at the Red Deer Regional Hospital. And I'll admit, the recovery wasn't easy, and that's a story for another video. I had pump brain, depression, and unexplained anger were just a few of the things that I experienced. And the trauma to my body triggered another autoimmune disease that appeared a year later. If you want to learn why I needed to undergo open heart surgery, you can click here and watch this video. It explains what birth defect I had and what the 9 years before heart surgery was like. If you have questions about the Ross procedure, comment below and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. I am not a doctor or an educated in open heart surgery, but I did experience it firsthand.